Hello, welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Today's chapters are Luke chapter 7 and 2 Kings 7. Now, the stories in both these chapters concern a city gate, concern faith and offense. Both the New Testament and Old Testament today, we look at the city gates, offense and faith. Now, remember the Arameans had circled Samaria, and the king of Israel was captive together with all his people. They were eating their donkeys, they'd eaten their dogs. Some women had even eaten their children, and they were in a desperate situation. Elisha stands before the king of Israel and he says, listen, by this time tomorrow, a seah, which is 5 kilograms of the finest flour, will sell for a shekel. In other words, the economy is going to be back to normal. God's going to lift the siege. Well, the king was leaning on the arm of a military official, and the military official was quite skeptical, probably offended at Elisha, and he says, look, even if the Lord could open the floodgates of heaven, how could this happen? Elisha seems to be quite a grumpy guy, because he says, listen, you're going to see it, but because of the way your attitude to this, you're not going to experience it. Well, we then get shown the lepers outside the city gates. So the Arameans hadn't, gone to attack them. They were lepers. Now the lepers said, listen, we're going to die here, starvation outside the city gate. We might as well just go over to the Arameans, and who knows, they might have mercy on us. They might kill us, which would be better than starving to death. They pitch up, and the Arameans have fled. The Bible tells us this is what happened, that they heard the chariots of God around them, and they thought that the Israelites had hired the Hittites and the Egyptians to come and attack them, so they just ran. Well, the lepers were scrounging around, gorging themselves, and then they said, oh, you know what, we better go and tell the rest of the people. So they shout from the city gates, because they can't go in, they're lepers, and they say, come and plunder the land, God set us free. Well, the king wakes up in the middle of the night, and he says, you know what's happened? These Arameans have hidden in the hills. They know we're going to run out to their empty tents, and they're going to ambush us. So they send out a couple of guys on chariots to go and have a look with some of the horses that they hadn't eaten. And anyway, at the end of the day, it turns out to be the case. And so the whole of Israel moves out of Samaria. They go plunder the goods of the Arameans. And this guy who was, the soldier that the king was leading on, is now being posted at the gate, and he gets trampled underfoot. I suppose if there's any lesson here, it's apart from the wonder of God's provision and the way that he protects his people, is that your attitude toward God moving is pretty important. Anyway, let's go to Luke chapter 7. Jesus is in Capernaum, and there is a centurion there who has a sick servant. And so he asked Jesus to come to his house and to heal this guy. Jesus, on his way, he sends an envoy, and he says to them, listen, I am a man under authority, and I have people under me. I know what authority is. Jesus can just speak, and my servant will be made well. I don't deserve to have him under my roof. Jesus was amazed. There's only 2 times in the Bible Jesus was amazed. One, when people had unbelief in Nazareth, and then this one. He's astonished. He says, this is amazing faith. Now, as he moves on, he gets to a gate, the gate of Nain, and there's a funeral procession. And so he passes a widow, and he has compassion. He says, don't worry, ma'am. And he touches the coffin, that's put in there to show us that he was offending all sorts of religious protocols. You didn't touch dead bodies. And this guy, hops up out of his casket, and his fame spreads across the whole city. John the Baptizer hears about this, and he says, send a message to Jesus. Is he the one to come? Is he the Messiah, or should we be expecting somebody else? Now, this is a weird comment from John, because John had prophesied that Jesus was the one to come. You can have all sorts of reasons by why he said it, but I think that he was offended. Jesus was not doing the things that John thought he was going to do. He thought he was going to overthrow Rome. He thought he was going to commit judgments, etc., which is true, but it wasn't going to happen then. And so Jesus says, tell John what you see, dead being raised, etc. I love John. He says, in fact, there's none greater born of woman. But then he says this, blessed are those who are not offended because of me. Now that word offended is the word scandalon, which is the verb which describes the action of a bait hook being set off. So I've created a box here. Here's a little mouse. There's some bait at the end of this hook. When the mouse takes the bait, the box falls on his head. Jesus says, blessed is he who doesn't have the box of offense falling on his head because of me. How many times does God not do the things we think he should do? He uses people who we think shouldn't be used. He gives mercy and justice to people we don't think deserve it. He works with churches that are flawed and warped. They've hurt me. Jesus says, blessed are those who are not offended. The very next story is of Simon, a Pharisee, inviting Jesus to his house, and a sinful woman anoints Jesus, and he's offended. And Jesus turns to him in love and says, hey, listen, man, don't be offended at my goodness. Don't be offended at my working, because you'll miss it. You'll miss it like the centurion in Samaria. You'll miss it like Simon. You'll miss it like John the Baptizer.